Trauma. Everyone has it. No one talks about it. It seems easier to stay silent, ignore it, or stuff it than it does to honor it, learn from it, and finally heal. Trauma is debilitating, yet so often we suffer in silence. Trauma is not meant to be battled alone, and we are no longer going to suffer in silence. Together, we are creating a safe place to speak, to share our stories, and grow our strength as we heal. Together, we are giving a voice to those who have been silenced, bringing darkness into light, and letting God use our stories. Today, we find ourselves again. We relight our spark and let it light up the world. Stop SIS is a nonprofit organization dedicated to educating on issues of trauma and trafficking, as well as the amazing power of the healing journey. Welcome to Stop SIS. Hey, you guys. Big welcome back to Stop SIS, Stop Suffering in Silence. My name is Denise Walsh, and I'm here with co-host Rachel Timothy. And today we have a super special guest. Our guest is a life coach herself and holds a master's in clinical mental health counseling and is recognized as a national certified counselor. However, she's not just another life coach. She, in fact, has her own trafficking story and is now able to work with survivors all over the country dealing with complex trauma, as well as serve as an advocate and a mentorship role for survivors in organizations in her home state. She has experience in working with adult children of alcoholics, abuse, SRA, and substance abuse, and just has a ton of experience. And so a big Stop SIS welcome to Amy Pfeffer.
Hello.
Hello. Yes, you, as I said, are not just another coach. I think there's certainly a lot of beautiful, amazing, powerful counselors and life coaches out there, but you have your own survivor story, and I'd love to hear a bit more about that.
Absolutely. Well, just want to say thank you guys so much for having me today. It's an honor, and I just love what you guys are doing out there for survivors and just people who are looking to, get over their trauma and see what's beyond on the other side. So thank you for what you're doing. I do want to just clarify, I do work with sex traffic survivors and trafficking victims. I was not a victim of that. Looking back, I know that my younger sister was, my cousin had lost her life in the pornographic film industry, but I grew up in the sex industry. So there was sexual abuse, but I was not trafficked myself. But again, my name is Amy Pfeffer. As Denise mentioned, I own Elysian Oaks Life Coaching. And I came from a very unstable background with all kinds of abuse, was in survival mode from a very young age, lived with different families from the age of 13 onwards. And somehow our family, my siblings and I, we managed to escape the foster system. And DCS did not remove us from our home, which that amazes me still today. Looking back, and it's, I know that you all are based in Michigan, and that's where my biological mother and her family is from, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So she married my father when she was 17. He was 36, so significant age difference. She had, I believe, 9 brothers and sisters, so a big family, poor from my understanding, and physically abused by her brothers and her father. So at age 17, she fled this environment to kind of escape one form of abuse to experience another type of abuse with an alcoholic and kind of rage-filled father at the time. My mother eventually left him to be with another man who then had a history of physical, substance, sexual abuse within his family. Each of the girls in our family were sexually abused before the age of 5. And my mother began working in the sex industry. Both of my younger sisters then went on to work in the sex industry as well. And as I mentioned, unfortunately, my cousin She was in the pornographic film industry in Los Angeles, and she, unfortunately, we were the same age, and she lost her life in 2019. At one point in time, there was a man that was nicknamed Satan, who was, I'm like, Satan, literally that was his nickname, and he was living in our home. And he came from the sex industry and went on to groom and rape my younger sister multiple times. So I had to testify against him and my mother in a court environment as a teenager. And obviously that's a very traumatizing, experience for anyone. So this work is very personal for me. The sex industry was my life, a lot of my life in my most developmental years, because of my mother's choices, as well as the fact that my siblings and I often lived with the strip club owner. So
can you describe, when you say sex industry versus porn versus trafficking? Because in my mind, they're also the same. So how would you differentiate them?
So my cousin was in the pornographic film industry. For my siblings and I, we grew up in the strip clubs. Okay. So when I say that's part of the sex industry to me, but we were always in the strip clubs or around individuals.
That was like the scene you grew up in, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Right. So would you say you weren't necessarily trafficked there? You were just around it. And so you would have been that would have been your next job. Like it was kind of like the family business at some point.
Right. And we didn't own the strip club or anything like that, but it's my mother worked there. And then my younger sisters ended up going into that type of industry. And so really, there were points in time where my mother had taken pictures of me in like a bunny costume when I was 4 years old. And she said, I want to send this to Playboy because I think that would be so wonderful if you were featured. There were times where she would say, this man who was nicknamed Satan, he wanted me to wear a shirt that said Satan's property when I turned 18, things like that became the norm. And it was just trauma. The sex industry, it was so normalized in our home that it was not seen as taboo or anything like that. It was just normal.
Right. And so when did you decide that's not normal, or I don't want to follow in those footsteps?
It's funny because I always knew this is not the life that I ever desire. I don't want to move in this direction. There's almost like that teeter-totter between hope and hopelessness that kind of comes into play. And there were moments that I felt hopeless, where I could see a woman could use her body as an object to be revered, and that some sort of pretentious respect could come from that. So there were times that I entertained it, obviously, but I always thought it doesn't matter where I came from. I feel like I'm worth more than that. And I felt like my younger sisters were worth more than that. My mother was worth more than that, but they just didn't see the value in their own life. Whereas that's really the only difference for me is when I came to know Yeshua, my God, at age 17, that's where he spoke identity to me in a very powerful way that was beyond what anyone had spoken to me in humanity before. And I knew that is not where I belonged.
Do you remember what the women were like what the women that were constantly at these strip clubs? Of course, your mom, but also the other women. Like, I don't know, because I know most of them come most likely from abuse already. So that's where they only see their worth. But was any of them holding on to a hope of wanting to get out? Were they trapped? Was it just a stepping stone that they thought they would have? Like, what were they like?
I do remember because many of them were in our home. And then when I stayed at the strip club owner's home, they were there as well. And I do remember talks of, look at how much money. I mean, some of my younger siblings were there counting stripper dollars, and helping them count their money. So sometimes it was prideful comments like, look at how much money I've made, and like, look what I'll be able to get. But a lot of them had children. And so you would hear them say, I can't wait until I can get out. A lot of them had emotional avoidance, right? They weren't ready to dive into any deep discussions. A lot of it was like levity, humor, trying to keep themselves out of anything serious discussion, anything like that. A lot of substance abuse. There were fights that my mother was in sometimes with some of the strippers that would come to our home and stay for long periods of time. And I just remember the trauma surrounding that, knowing that we couldn't stop the abuse there from happening. My stepfather was also very physically abusive. He didn't want her to stay there. He wanted her to have more respect for herself. And so did all of us. We really said, if you would just work at McDonald's or, you know, something, like, we would prefer for that to happen. And she said, no, it's just skin. It's just skin. It's a job like any other job. And so she really demoralized herself. And that's really what I felt from the women as well. But it was a mix, you know, women that some had hope to get out, and then a lot of them never saw hope.
They just resigned to, this is my life.
Yeah.
I was going to ask about addiction and substance abuse, because I have to imagine there's some dissociative quality. You know, your brain goes somewhere else and your body's doing, you know, if you don't really want to be there, substance abuse certainly can help them disassociate if needed.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to escape and withdraw, and harmful releases, even if it's harmful, it's a release. And it's helped me to have empathy and understand the mindset mentality of anyone who would turn towards drugs or alcohol. It's sometimes life is incredibly difficult. And if there's no one in their back pocket or resources around them that provides hope, a lot of times they feel their hands are tied, and that's a way to escape. So I get it.
Now, you said your sisters started down that path. Were they older or younger than you?
Younger. I'm the oldest of the siblings that were in the Wisconsin area. I was born in Northern California, but I do have some siblings in California as well, but largely estranged from my family. Yeah.
Were they in their teen years then when they decided to go that route, or were they older?
Yes. Yeah,
okay.
They were in.
I just think that's an interesting thing, to be an adult and to say, okay, this is the job I choose on some level, right? Versus being a teenager and starting off young.
Well, and also, I hate to even say, and I don't know that I'm going to say this word, but I don't want to call someone in my family a groomer, but it's like my mother would purchase stripper clothes for my younger sisters for their senior pictures. And that's what one of them would wear, you know, and it's looking back and just seeing that is heartbreaking. Did they really have a choice?
That's what I want to pull out here. Like, when you're looking at porn videos, or you're looking at women who are in strip clubs, I mean, that is not ultimately their choice, in my opinion. It comes from years of abuse. It comes from having no other choice. So does that make it a choice if there's no other choice? No, it's forced. It's their only way to survive in that moment. Right. And so, I mean, I think it's something that I want to scream from the mountaintops for anybody who attends the strip clubs or watches porn videos. They don't want to be there. This is not their choice.
Yeah, they may have convinced themselves that they want to be there, and it may provide some sort of pretentious escape or power, but they didn't really have a choice. And if they could have chosen something else, they would have. And that's why I really have a problem with the term sex worker and trying to give sex worker rights. It's like, yeah, let's take a look at every single one of those individuals and see the heartbreak that ensued from childhood on, and then we'll have a different discussion.
I feel like where the choice comes is on who walks through that door or who turns on that video. That's where somebody has a choice.
That's right. I agree.
And somewhere along the line, like you mentioned, the grooming takes place. We have girls who have been a part of these types of things. And they may have even told us, yeah, I chose to do that because of the grooming that took place. So once they understood the gaslighting, the emotional pull, the other like factors, essentially, they realized that, no, wait a minute, I was tricked into this. And this wasn't my choice. And I would have chosen something else. But I think, oh dear, sorry guys. I think that groomers are really good at making you feel like you're, that you're emotionally connected on some level.
And I don't even think for my mother that she would ever consider herself a groomer. I don't even think until really this moment, I've never put that title on her. But I think that she was trying to empower her girls the only way that she knew how. And that's really incredibly sad and depraved.
Well, and your whole environment was grooming you to that lifestyle. Like, yes, it was her, but it was her choice of which environment she put you in. But your brain was conditioned to see this as work. This is what you do. And so everything was pushing you and grooming you to that direction.
Yeah.
It's a miracle. It's a miracle you are where you are.
Oh my goodness. And I will say, 17 years of age, April 18th, 1999, when I met Yeshua and my life changed, I look at myself in the mirror today and testify to myself because I should not be alive or thriving in any sense of the word. And I couldn't without him. And I'm eternally grateful.
So tell me a bit about that separation then. Like, all right, this is not the life I choose. I often say our whys are born out of blessings or burdens. You're like, all right, I'm going to duplicate this part of my family and I'm going to get the heck out of Dodge from this part of my family.
Yeah.
The pendulum sometimes swings the other direction. So tell me a bit about your separation or your choice to create something new and then how your family handled that.
Yeah. It was quite the process. So 1999, I came to know the Lord. Literally everything changed. I was still living with different families and still living with the strip club owner from time to time, just bouncing around to different homes. And unfortunately, when you come from that type of unstable background, people who offer for you to stay in their home, they have the best intentions. It's very authentic and genuine. And then it's like, whoa, what did we get ourselves into? And so I was kicked out oftentimes. So I was living with another family member at the time when I came to know the Lord and just dedicating my heart to study and understanding who this God was that could have created me. The woman who lived there asked me if I would consider joining a pageant. And I said, absolutely not. Like, I'm just coming out of the strip clubs. I'm not a pageant girl. I mean, look at me. What in the world? And she said, you would be able to talk about what Jesus has done in your life. And I said, okay. And so I joined. I would say most of the other girls had been in pageants their whole lives. It was in the Miss America pageant, affiliated with the Miss America pageant at the local level. And all I cared about was talking about Yeshua and this God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I just wanted to shout it from the rooftops, very, loud and bold and on fire, right? And they had offered every single girl the opportunity to put on the crown, the Miss America crown and sash, to walk around the stage as though you've won, so you know how to do it. I was 100% confident that that would never be me. And so I declined. And I said, I'm going to be working on my song over here and just rehearsing that. So when the night came for us to do the pageant, I won. I won the talent. I won the local title, and I was able to go on to the Miss Wisconsin pageant. And I won the talent there. I placed in the top 10. I was the youngest contestant, and I got a full ride scholarship to a private Roman Catholic college. So I was the first person in my family to graduate from high school. And then I turned that scholarship down to go to Bible college. So I just wanted to learn about the Lord. And so from that point on, I think college was really the turning point for me, because I could stay in a campus environment and knew I wasn't going to get kicked out. Nobody could kick me out. I was there. And everyone was, kind of for the first time, like out of their parents' home. And the biggest, I think the hard part was when the campus was shut down for the holidays and I didn't really have a place to go. So I remember sometimes, very few times I stayed in my car. Sometimes I would go home with friends, but I just knew, you have a knowing when you're a burden on a family and you're not really their family, you don't really belong. And so that was hard, but working through the trauma of that and making friends that would give me the space to kind of process and grieve and cry and things like that. And then I landed in the Nashville area in 2005. And I'd been to multiple colleges at that point in time. And I wanted to be in the music industry. I'm a saxophone player and a vocalist. And so I was playing downtown BB King's with James Brown's old saxophonist and singing. And I love soul music and all of that good stuff. I saw some things behind the scenes in the music industry that caused me to ponder the way the music industry was handled. The closer I got to a record deal, the weirder people got, the more unsafe that I felt. And so I backed out of 3 different opportunities to move forward in the music industry. At that point, I just decided to get into the healthcare field. And so I've been in the healthcare field for upwards of 17 plus years. I started working with sex traffic survivors, just volunteering about 7 to 8 years ago, because my heart is with the women that have come from these types of backgrounds. When I started working there, I started seeing a different type of survivor. And I decided to get my master's in clinical mental health counseling, and really try to help a lot more in a more professional way. And so I did. I got my master's in clinical mental health counseling. I worked for a group practice for about 1.5 years. And then I've decided to move off into my own direction, and I own Elysian Oaks Life Coaching, and I've started to work with a lot of survivors, and it's been literally the most rewarding work ever. So that's kind of the evolution of my story and where I've kind of landed.
Wow, that's beautiful. And I love how, I mean, we can probably all do this, right? Look back and see God bringing that next step, right, when we need it. How did your family handle you kind of separating from what they would consider the norm?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that question back up again. It was difficult. I remember coming back from college once or twice, and I had different kind of self-help books or like mental health counseling type books. One of them was Toxic Parents. And I remember they discovered that I had that book, and that there was a lot of mocking and a lot of taunting, oh, you think that we were toxic? Well, then you can go ahead and leave. So there was a lot of shut doors, ridicule. Even recently, there was a friend of mine, a childhood friend that I grew up with, that has come onto my life coaching page and also to my personal Facebook and started to say, I don't think that you remember your memories correctly. How could you have said this about your family? I'm very concerned about you, da 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 da. So what I'm seeing is like the closer to ugly truth that you are, when individuals are not ready to see the truth, they will question the truth that you are shouting from the rooftops. And so it's something that puts it's almost like a whistleblower situation where you're coming out and you're saying, this is the fact. I mean, anyone can go to public records. They can see when I testified in court, they can see everything, but it causes you to question your own memory and your own reality. And so at that point, as I was discovering this and it was coming to the forefront that, hey, I had an unstable background. I wasn't really able to say that without ridicule and ostracization and marginalization and total estrangement. And so what I've recognized is I simply have to move on in life without them. And honestly, it's a better path for me that I do. It is doesn't diminish the heartbreak of it. But I do know that it is a path that I have to take with them for safety reasons.
Right. Are your sisters still participating in the strip clubs? And
I'm not entirely sure. I know the last time I was in contact with them, they had backed away. And so it's my hope that that would continue, but I'm not entirely sure. Yeah.
right. It's one of those things. It's like when you take a step outside of the line, right? At first it's, where are you going? Do you think you're better than us? And, you know, you're getting outside of what we deem normal. And then eventually you hope, the hope would be, right, you offer hope and you've offered a new path where then eventually them or maybe their children will follow.
Yeah. Yeah, that is the hope. And, you know, I've wrestled through it throughout the years because it's definitely been over a decade of estrangement. And it teeters on that hope versus hopelessness. Like, but we are called to continue to pray for them.
Yeah.
Forgive them. And it's a messy process, and ask that the Lord bless them. And that at some point in time they can see truth.
Yeah. And I was going to say, and at the end of the day, your only, like, your job, right, is to stay true to you and stay on your path. And whether they choose to look, listen, follow, be encouraged or not is it eventually on them.
Mm-hmm.
So you now support lots of different survivors, but specifically those with complex trauma. It says here you also work with adult children of alcoholics, and then SRA, which is Satanic Ritual Abuse. Tell me a little bit about how you got involved in that.
Yeah, it really came through just my internship and then working at a group practice and seeing the clients before me that were having symptomology of ritual abuse. And so as they're sharing their story with me, they become my research. And so that's really how I started to get involved in it. And then recognizing, you know, in the Nashville area, there's a lot of trafficking. There's a lot of SRA, and it's really hidden in plain sight in a lot of cases, but it's rampant. It's everywhere. And I was not aware of that when I first got into this field. Mm-hmm.
Have there been any themes or anything that you would say these are some common like themes that survivors who have SRA in their past come in with, and then how do you support them in healing?
Yeah, so I mean, the common theme is there is sexual abuse, obviously. There is trafficking, and there's trafficking amongst several different groups. I mean, it could be within a church that it occurs. It can be within underground sects. It can be within a neighborhood. It can be multiple different places. But the key with satanic ritual abuse is the rituals, very particular rituals and masses and blood sacrifices and a lot of mind control programming as well. And so I've worked with a lot of, you know, government mind control where they've come out of projects or programs within the government entities where they're having memory flooding or something along those lines, and they don't know quite how it stacks up. And so as I'm diving into the research and giving them, you know, whether it's protocols or other survivor stories, or does this correlate to what you're remembering, you know, a lot of it kind of comes together there. But I mean, I could get into some of the gruesome details, but I don't know what, you know, how far you want to go.
Right. Well, and I think when you are working, you know, sometimes it's like, well, what would somebody do? And I think number one, just telling you their story is healing in itself. Having somebody believe them and help them put the pieces together, like you said, flooding, right, is like when the flashbacks, when things start coming to surface, but you don't quite know what it is or what it means, or like that's kind of jumbled. You're helping them put the pieces together. Yeah. And then we also know writing is therapeutic and can help move
Right.
things from
Now, a
the
lot of
frontal
them do
lobe
come
into
in.
memory.
Yes. A lot of them come in with programs that remember not to remember, do not tell program. If you do tell, there's suicide program in place. And then what I've found with a lot of my clients is when I mention, because I know Kathy O'Brien mentions that a lot, writing saved her life. It helped her to deprogram the program. And she was, horrifically abused by Michael Aquino, who was with the Temple of Set. So it's like, if she can deprogram, anybody can deprogram. But a program that's put in is do not write when you do not tell. You don't write it. And so trying to help them disobey that programming is very difficult. Yeah.
Wow. How would you do that? Is it writing in a safe place? Is it like, how would you start to reprogram that that trigger that says I can't write or something bad will happen?
So usually it's kind of helping them to become their own investigative journalist. So when the program is put in place, usually there's a double bind that happens to put the program in place. And the double bind always has to do with either themselves being tortured, ritually abused, or someone that they love in front of them. And that's how they get them to comply and accept the programming. So if they say to a young, sweet child who's innocent, if you tell, you will be killed or your family will be killed. Any child's going to do anything. So then when you put torture on top of that, they'll do anything. So they are willing and able to accept the programming. So a lot of times it's trying to get them back to that core memory. Who told you that? How do you know that this was a program? And you try to help them deconstruct that program. Now, some of these sects, Freemasons, Oddfellows, Eastern Star, a lot of them are very sophisticated in their programming, and they know how therapists or counselors or even people who are Christian and walk alongside them in prayer and different things would try to partner with them to deprogram. And so they construct programs around that to make it even more impenetrable programming. So it's been very difficult. It's not as simple as like a trauma survivor where it's like, write it out. I'm with you. I'm there for you. Be in a safe place. Mm-hmm. There's literal programs in place that tell them, if you do this, you will die or someone else that you love will die.
So when that's the case, it's not even like it's a memory that they even know, oh, this happened. I was told that this bad thing, they just have this visceral reaction. It's like that Pavlov's dog kind of experience where they don't even necessarily know why they're freaking out or why they're having this response. So helping them to get to that core memory can help potentially dissolve it at that level.
And one of the biggest things as, a support person is trying to help them build their own support system and community. But because churches aren't familiar with this, they don't know how to walk alongside these types of survivors. And so helpers get worn out very quickly. Friends, like new friends that they might make, if they're like, can you help me with this? People don't understand this world yet. And so that's my hope, is that we would raise awareness not only with sex trafficking, but with this very stigmatized and taboo topic of ritual abuse and satanic ritual abuse, so that we can really look at the ugly stuff, but walk with these people that Yeshua wants us to walk with.
One of the things,
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, when I had the chance to do lunch with Amy not too long ago, and there was just I took a lot away from our conversation, but one of the things that stuck with me that you said while we were talking is survivors are the people you want to lock arms with, because they've been through hell and they want Jesus. Mm-hmm. And those are the people you want to lock arms with and do life with and fight these battles with. And that just stuck with me, because I was like, yes, that's so true. When you meet people who it's just all surface level and they don't know how to go deeper yet, but then you have a survivor who's not only gone deeper, they've experienced some of the worst and found their healer. And I don't know, there's just, that was it. Like the way you explained that, I was like, yes, like that's what I'm drawn to. That's who I want to lock arms with as well. There's something special there.
There
And
really is.
I actually did a reel about it, and several people then were writing underneath it tears. And yes, like that's it. That's exactly
Yeah.
it.
Well, and I just think you all have tasted the closest thing to hell on earth. And if you can be in hell and you can get the hand of Jesus to pull you out and then choose him back after wrestling through the grief and the trauma and the torment and questioning, God, were you there with me? And when you see, yes, I was, and you choose him, it's so inspiring to the rest of us because you have the power. You have gone through the warfare and you can lead us in this very, very difficult time ahead. It's so beautiful how God can take what the enemy meant for evil and turn it to good that way. And that's really the blessing that I get to see every day with the survivors I work with.
Amen to that.
Do you have any cool stories of transformations that you've experienced?
So many. Yeah, I just think kind of like what you were saying before, grief demands a witness. And most of these people have felt so ostracized that when they come into session and you're able to not only hear what they're saying, but validate their story and believe them and be that witness to the grief that they've experienced and encountered. And when they see the love, you know, Yeshua is, we can't see the spiritual world. We know it's true. It's more true and real than what we can touch, you know, but we can't see it. And so when someone with skin on walks beside you, it's a very powerful thing. And to see someone just blossom and all of their goals start to be hit, you know, it's like I map out so many goals. I'm a project manager by trade, you know, and it's like we go through all these goals and action items and I'm tracking them and I'm like, boom, boom, boom. We're just hitting them because it's that love of Yeshua that penetrates it doesn't matter as much about the history. He heals it. That inner healing when it happens and they're delivered from their history and their past and the demonic torment and all of those things that happen. And then you get to see them making strides of independence. And when they say, thank you for walking with me, we get through all the goals and it's like, I want to retain them. I want to stay with them, but I'm like, you don't need me anymore. You know, that's the most beautiful thing. And honestly, I call myself the crying coach with a lot of my clients because some of them just aren't in touch with their emotions initially. And so my heart's just so connected to them. And I've seen where they've looked at me as I'm crying on their behalf when they don't have access to those emotions. And I'm like, I'm so sorry that I'm the one crying. And they're like, well, you're just doing what I can't right now. And then to see them be able to get in touch with their emotions and to get to the other side and be attuned to their own bodies and themselves. And then they can offer that empathy to others. It's just so powerful to see and to know it's not anything to do with me. All I do is choose Jesus back and care. I mean, that's not really a lot to ask, right? And that's really what we want the church to be for these types of survivors. We want the church to stand up in this place, to be able to look at the ugly, to see the power of our God.
Amen.
I don't know that I have another question right now.
Just so powerful.
It is. I think that's, you know, and I think those types of healing experiences, I mean, healing can happen in an instant or it can take months or years. But as we talk about the onion layers, every session you leave shifted, you leave changed, and 1% difference can take you in a completely different direction.
Yeah.
And so for those who have trauma in their past, what would you say to them if they are maybe stuck in a cycle of negative coping skills and they're doing the best that they can, but it feels like they're living in crisis mode and continue to drown, even though they're treading water.
Yeah.
What would you say
Well,
to them?
I've recently done an article with probably Alexandra that's out today. I would highly recommend that individuals go out and look at that article, because I do have quite a few resources, but ways that you can help. One of the things that I think is a very powerful tool, it's called the Gupta program. And I think it's like $350 to $400, but it's an amygdala retraining program that you can get yourself and kind of help yourself have empathy towards your body and your brain and all the things you've gone through. I think we need not only to work on it ourselves, but community. You need to invest in a community for yourself, a support system. And that's very difficult for survivors to do because of the trust. But I will say it is much better for a survivor to build their own community than let a community come to them. Because when you can look outside of yourself and see safe and unsafe characteristics in others, safe and unsafe characteristics in ourselves, we all have them, right? We all need to be working on them. But you are the one that needs to cling on to tenacity. You are the one that needs to step forward and see that others have safe or unsafe characteristics, and you need to pursue that relationship. And I tell people it is safer for you to do that than for others to pursue you, because they may be clinging on to some sort of trauma marker that you've got still. You might have a radar out there that they're picking up on that it's like, nope, I should not go in that direction. But sometimes we don't know. We don't know we shouldn't go in that direction. And so if we just go with what's easy and convenient and in front of us because someone's pursuing us, that can be very dangerous. So we need to be the ones to pursue. And building a community and a support system is very difficult. Nobody teaches you how to do it. It takes a long time. So try just as you are. You will continue to get better and better over time and be more and more refined. Don't judge yourself. Don't be critical of yourself and where you are. It just is. You just are where you are today, and that is okay. Have grace with yourself. Learn to have empathy. Think of yourself as multifaceted, and I know, Denise, you're familiar with internal family systems, but we all have these different inner family parts. You have a child part. Her voice needs to be heard. His voice needs to be heard if we have men watching as well. You need to connect with that younger part of you. And sometimes you just need to go to a park and get on a swing. You just need to buy a set of crayons and a coloring book and just minister to that younger part of you. And another thing I would say, I think a lot of survivors get really upset at themselves, but also others when they think they should be over their trauma really quickly. Especially when you're talking about satanic ritual abuse, mind control programming. Some of these individuals have walked with it for their whole life. And it's not easy to deprogram. It's not easy to just get over your trauma. And so rushing yourself to healing will frustrate you. If the church doesn't have enough patience and they're saying, hey, you should kind of be over this by now, like Jesus should kind of have already healed you. That is a Job's friends mentality. And if you remember, God kind of rebuked Job's friends. We have to remember to be patient and loving and kind and all the fruits of the Spirit, right? We talk about it all the time, but it is very legitimate. We have to give ourselves time to heal. And sometimes that is decades, and that is okay.
Awesome. Well, we will put your website, ElysianOaksLifeCoaching.com, in the show notes, as well as the article with probably Alexandra that will be in the show notes as well. Because, I think you're touching on such huge, deep topics that we can now send people on their own.
Yes, there's so much out there. Yeah, and I would love to be a resource. So if anyone has any questions, just feel free to reach out and let me know.
Awesome. Rachel, do you have anything you want to add?
I just want to say thank you. Thank you for saying yes to Jesus back when you were 17.
Aww.
And for being where you are now to help so many. there's pieces of your story that I get, and there's pieces that I don't get necessarily, but like it's okay, because that's the way that God plans it all, so that we can all go hand in hand and work with survivors. And I just am so thankful that you're in our life and that we can use you as a resource, and vice versa.
Yes.
It's just pretty dang cool the way that God is working in all of our ministries.
It is. He is awesome. Well, thank you again so much for having me. I appreciate you guys very much.
Yes, thank you for saying yes. As I think when it's not always easy to let go of the old and to cling and to create new, but when we do, the ripple effect of our healing journey and us saying yes to our spark impacts everybody around us. And so you certainly are leaving a glorious trail. Wouldn't it be cool if like there was, like, I think of like the ripples in the lake, right? And if it were like gold, like that's how it feels. Like it's like
that would be beautiful. And y'all are doing the same, by the way. Thank you.
Rainbow ripples. We'll create something. So thank you so much, Amy, for hanging out with us today, sharing your story. And definitely check out her resources, you guys. This is just the beginning of the conversation. But if you are a survivor of SRA, of trafficking, of anything, you certainly connect with StopSIS. But Amy provides one-on-one connection for those who are looking for personal healing. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with us today, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you so much for listening to this powerful episode of Stop Suffering in Silence. If you are interested in booking Rachel to speak at your school, your church, or on your podcast, then please email openblindeyes@protonmail.com. If you are interested in sponsoring a survivor on their healing journey and would like to donate to Stop SIS, then please check out the link in the description box or show notes below, or you can email stopsis@protonmail.com. And finally, if you are currently suffering in silence, or you know somebody who is, whether they're dealing with a current trauma or one from the past, then we will always recommend that you reach out to your local resources and find a counselor that you can trust, because nobody is meant to suffer alone. Have an amazing week, and thank you for being here.